Okay, because then we have to have power because we have a feature on our Escalator when the unit's on inspection and the stop button is pulled out and the stop button here is pushed in, that if we trip a switch, it makes an audible alarm. Alright? When we go to test this, we're going to pull this plate back and we're going to test these switches. We're going to watch the poundage on the tool, or the PSI on the tool, and then do the math conversion to figure out how many foot-pounds that is, but we're going to listen to the audible. When we hear the audible, that's when it trips, and that's what we're going to record the value, right? Okay? So you have to have power on. If you hit this stop button, that opens the safety chain, which means that you're not going to get any more audible. Alright? If you don't have it on inspection, you're more audible. It has to be on inspection. Okay? Can you get me the 4 mil? So this kit that I'm using right now, this is something that we purchased from Kone. We have a version that uses a torque multiplier and a torque wrench. It's just not as accurate. It's just not as good of a setup. What is it? Do you know what this? Are you gonna? Do you know what the service department uses?
I don't.
Okay. You might want to find out. Because if they use the same thing I'm using, you just want to borrow it from them. Because the tool is, it's $2,000.
Right.
Right.
Find out what Chad uses.
Yeah.
This is going to go on here. Okay. This goes on here. I don't like to use the little short screws. I don't use these, right? I use these. They're nice and long. They go through here. So we're going to hook this on here. $750, but we're about 30 pounds off, so we had about $720, okay? grab that piece of paper, that envelope right there that says cone A on the top of it. So we registered about 720 PSI. So they have a chart here. So we were about 720. So between 709 and 728, we're probably about 385 PSI, or 385 foot-pounds. So we're taking hydraulic pressure and converting it to foot-pounds. If we want to know the actual real thing that we registered here, does anybody have a calculator on?
Got my phone.
So if we're taking hydraulic pressure, could we use our normal ranges that we use for hydro pressures? If we get a tool like this, would it work just as good as this one? If it goes to 1,000?
Got to go to 1,000. The gauge will work, yeah. Yeah, the gauge part isn't the expensive part, it's
Right.
some of the bullshit.
Right.
Yeah. So take the number, PSI, which is 730, or did I say, no, 720, sorry, 720, minus 9.6402, divided by 1.841.
386.
Okay, so we registered 386 foot-pounds of force to pull this plate back and actuate this switch. All right. So remember, by code, we have to have less than 400 foot-pounds of force. So 400, 400, 800, and vertically 150 in the center only. Okay. So we would meet the criteria. We would be obviously code compliant, and we're at the higher end.
So you just test it at one spot and you're good, or do you need to do all three?
So you test this side, and most inspectors and most code authorities are going to say, okay, this is below 400, this is below 400. There's no reason to test the center. All right. Now, if they make you test the center, you have to have a gauge that'll go that high.
Right. You need to get 16.
You need a 2,000 pound or 2,000 psi gauge. Okay.
Now, in the real world, what would cause that to move? The steps being out of alignment?
Just this. Tripping on it, luggage. Something gets caught in between the cone teeth and the and the step tread. You know, like a quarter, a stone, a piece of salt. I mean, pretty much anything.
Yeah.
I was telling these guys it's notorious on a down running escalator. People will obviously run and jump. And they jump and they hit this plate and it moves it and it trips it and shuts down. It's a manual, it's a locked manual reset fault, so you have to plug in a tool to reset it. You can't just key it back on, it actually has to physically be reset.
Right.
So it's a huge nuisance problem, especially with vandalism. That's why it's imperative that we get these switches set up to the higher end,
Right.
so that we're not having nuisance trips. So now what I want you guys to do, you obviously saw how I tested it. And again, if you set this up the way it's supposed to be set up, this will be just like I did it. Pull it back a couple times, you get the poundage, moving on, right? You obviously want to test this before you do the inspection. Right?
I would plan on taking a day or two to go try to figure out everything you need to do and already know how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, when you go through my startup my startup documents and my testing documents, you're gonna kind of see that you can do that easy enough. But comb impacts are one thing that you want to set up the day, not the day of, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let you guys move the springs, right? Lengthen them. Take a measurement of what they are right now. Lengthen the spring, compress the spring, move the switch. Whatever. Just mess with it a little bit. And mess with it in small increments and see how much it all changes. Because you might move that switch 0.3 millimeter and it might change it by 50 pounds. you might move that spring by 2 millimeters and it might frickin' shoot it through the moon, you know what I mean? So I want you to see that. And that it's a very, very touchy, fine adjustment that once it's set where it needs to go, you really shouldn't have to mess with it anymore. Okay? So do vertical, or I'm sorry, do horizontal first. So just mess with, well, you can do it this way. Why don't we move the tool over to here, leave this side exactly the way it is, test this one and see where you guys end up at, and then alter it from there. All right? And then once you're satisfied with that, we'll move the tool back to the center and we'll do the vertical. Okay?
Yep.
All right. You get out of your way and you guys can experiment with it.